Welcome to Unforbidden Truth. I'm Andrew. Today I'll be speaking with Victoria McDorman. Victoria McDorman is the youngest of three sisters who, as a child in Craigsville, Virginia, endured years of physical and sexual abuse by her father, Vincent McDorman. In July 2003, when she was just 6 years old, her older half brother, Christopher Bennett, fatally shot Vincent after he allegedly caught him abusing Victoria. Christopher was later convicted and sentenced to 3 life terms, totaling 1,800 years, after accepting a plea deal to avoid the death penalty. Victoria has become an outspoken advocate for her brother's release, calling him her hero and best friend, appearing on shows like Dr. Phil, organizing rallies and petitions under the Free Christopher Bennett movement, and sharing her story to help secure clemency. Here's my interview with Victoria McDorman.
My name is Victoria McDorman, and I am from, originally Craigsville, Virginia, and I currently live in Norfolk, Virginia.
So, tell me about your brother, Christopher Bennett, as if I've never heard about his case nor himself as an individual.
Ooh, okay. Christopher Bennett is the person who, currently he's serving 1,800 years, which is 3 life sentences in the Virginia DOC. When I was 6, he broke into my biological father's house and killed him when he found him molesting me. Um, he has been in prison ever since, which has been over 20 years now. He is a very caring person, very protective, obviously, and a very hopeful person because over the past 20 years, he's never given up on the fact that one day he'll be able to reduce his sentence and be able to come home. Um,
Okay. So what was your household like growing up before Chris went to prison, if you're even able to remember that far back of like any memories or anything growing up?
yeah, so my childhood was kind of hectic. I have a lot of memories when I was younger. So I can remember one of the first memories I have. I'm in a walker. As a little toddler, I like can't walk on my own. I'm in the kitchen with my mom, and she's talking to another person about my brother Calvin's funeral. He had just passed away before I was born, and like some of the next memories I have, I'm sitting in the kitchen floor crying as I watch my brothers and my mom leave after Vince and them had been fighting. And, Vince had slammed this huge coffee table that we had in the living room, which was there's a little hallway that connected the kitchen to the living room. And I remember just sitting there crying, watching all of them leave. And like Chris was one of the last ones out of the door. And I remember trying to go with him. He's like, no, you have to stay. So it was very like hectic. I remember, Vince was very much um he'd give you or do anything type of parent. So like he'd build us, these insane jungle gyms out of the random stuff or buy us go-karts and let us drive them or riding lawnmowers. He was obsessed with riding lawnmowers and would fix them, those and tractors. And there was a huge kind of lot attached to the house, and he would let us drive everything over there. And I remember getting thrown off of many a go-karts, getting run over a lot to the point that I had surgery. Um, yeah, it was very hectic, chaotic. It wasn't always like terrible. I remember like some of the happiest times was flying out of go-karts. And I remember going to the creek down the road a lot. And EJ or Chris, which EJ is another brother of mine, would come and get us and, chase us with snakes, which was terrifying, and catching crawdads with us. Um, and so I don't really have memories of Vince and my mom getting along. I remember Vince had a girlfriend. Her name was also Elizabeth. Um, she was a very like she was always like sleeping kind of person. She had a dog and a cat, and she was more of a hands off kind of person. Like she was you could go, and if she wanted to hang out with you or play with you, she would play with you, and if she did not, she like wanted nothing to do with you. So I remember her for most of my childhood being there with Vince.
Okay. Speaking of Vince, how would you describe him to somebody who's never heard his name nor is familiar with his case?
Um, Vince was complicated. Vince, um, you have like a lot of good childhood memories of Vince and a lot of terrible childhood memories of Vince. Like I there's always like a part of me that's like, oh yeah, it's very quick to be like, he is a monster, and he is. He was a child molester, he was a child abuser, 100%, and it's so mixed up in the other memories of being like, well, I do remember him, building us a jungle gym, and we got to do whatever on the jungle gym, and what kind of other kids got to ride go karts at 3, 4, 5 years old. Um, or go camping all the time. But there was always like that twist, that like catch 22 going on. If I got pulled out of, school to go on trips, it wasn't just a trip. We were always stopping at somebody's house, and he would let other people molest us, or rather me. I can't speak for Casey or Anna, but would like let other people molest me, or invite people over to, the house in Craigsville where other people would come over. um, you never knew which side of him you were going to get. It was always 50-50. You could stand up to him one day and be like, no, I, don't want to do this. And he'd act like, oh, why are you so afraid of me? Like, fine, you don't have to do this. And then the next day it's, no, I don't want to do this. And you're getting a belt against your back until you bleed. Or, you're watching your sister have that happen to her. Um, or, I remember standing up to him and telling him I didn't want him to touch me anymore. And that was probably one of the worst beatings of my life I ever got from him. I was in, I guess, not kindergarten, but like pre-K, going into kindergarten, early kindergarten. Um, I was going to the actual elementary school at that point. I remember that. And I just told him no. I told him I was going to tell my teachers what was going on. And thought that would like stop everything. And like I said, one of the worst beatings I had ever gotten from him. And so yeah, Vince is a very complicated man.
So you mentioned that he would have other people abuse you. Do you know if he was getting anything out of it? And I only asked because I recently interviewed a gentleman on death row who claims that his mother would let him get not only molested but raped and so on and so forth, and she would get paid money for it. So do you know if he was getting anything out of it, like financially, or if it was just like sick pleasure, or like what was he getting out of that? Do you know?
I don't know. I know he was very good friends with the people. I know one of the guys specifically was always at the house in Craigsville hanging out with him. They would work on like the tractors together and stuff. So you kind of never knew if he was there, or at least I never knew if he was there, for which reason, to be with Vince or to like take you away, you know what I mean? Or to like go to your room and stuff. So it was more like a just hide situation, but I have no clue if Vince got anything out of it.
Okay. So do you have any memory from the day that Christopher killed Vince after witnessing you being abused?
Yes. So the way that day goes in my mind, because I do have like the blank spot where I don't have any memory of Chris, is I remember that night. I was really upset. I didn't think it was my night to be in Vincent's bed. I remember crying a lot. Um, I remember crying at him and told him like everything hurt. I didn't want him touching me anymore. And that I like just I didn't want to be touched. Make him. And I don't have any memories. The next memory I have is Anna waking me up out of Vincent's bed, and she was like, come on, you have to get up." And like I was really confused, and she's grabbing a shirt for me. She's like, "Come on, put your arms up. You have to get dressed. You have to get dressed." Vincent's head exploded. And I was like, what? And she was like, his head exploded. And so I thought at the time that I had made him so mad that his head exploded. Like nobody thought anything about there being a killer in the house or Vince was killed. And I remember crying and freaking out, and she's like putting this shirt over me, and she's like pulling me into. So the way it was this is like Vincent's bedroom. This was the living room. They were connected. Vince was in the living room. There's the little doorway right here and a doorway right here that went into like the back portion, and there was a bathroom like diagonally that connected them. Casey was already in the bathroom when Anna shoved me in there, and she was crying and I'm freaking out. And I remember leaving the bathroom and watching Anna like monkey crawl onto the couches, and like there's brain matter everywhere. Vince is on the floor. She's going for the phone because she's going to call the ambulance because his head exploded. And then I don't remember her talking to them. I just remember crying a lot and like freaking out in the house. And then at some point, either I don't know if she figured it out or they explained it to her, but I remember everything switched from Vincent's head exploded to there was a killer. And we were all huddled in the corner in the living room with the body like laid out in front of us. And we hear knocking on the door, and for some reason we think it's the killer. And I was like, well, what if it's the killer coming back? Like we can't go there. Anna's freaking out. She's like, don't say anything, everybody be quiet, you know. And the rescue squad personnel started yelling at us by name, and I don't remember who they are. I just remember we were around them all the time. I don't remember their names though. And they're like, come to the door, come on, like come on. And we jump over Vincent's legs to leave out of into the little hallway to the kitchen and out the front door, and they take us across the street. And then I like remember them praising us and being like, who knew to call 911, who did so good, gave us toys and told us to, lay down on the couches over there. um and then from there, I remember them like debating who to call, like if it was our mom or our grandmother. Vince worked with them, but my mom had worked with them too, so they kind of didn't know, but they ended up calling Vincent's mom, my grandmother, to come get us. And I remember talking to the police and just being really scared and confused. I don't remember too much about what was said. Um, I know he was a state policeman, or I think he was because of like I remember he had a huge hat, and so um, I don't think I've seen anybody else but them wear those since I've grown up. And then I remember my grandmother taking us away, and I remember not like I didn't feel anything. Like I didn't feel like dread. I wasn't, like, oh my God, what's next? I was just so at peace because I knew Vince was dead. There was nothing he could do to us anymore. Like I wasn't like a yay moment, but it was also more like very calming and being like, we never have to come back here again.
Right, right. Do you remember? I know you were so young, but do you remember like when Chris was either arrested or charged or convicted or sentenced for that matter?
Yes. So I was with my grandmother. She, I guess, had temporary custody at the time, would eventually get full custody of us. And we're all in her van, and we're going to my Aunt Faith's antique store. And she's telling my sister Anna, she was like, it was Chris, right? You're sitting here because my sister Anna was way older than me. She was like 10 at the time. She's like 4 years older than me. She's was like 10 at the time. And I remember my grandmother getting onto her, and like that's when I found out it was Chris who had done it. um I don't remember watching his trial. I remember it being one of those things that like once it came on the TV, if I was in the room, they'd turn it off really quick. And one time specifically, I remember like we had a bunch of like my aunts and stuff over at my grandmother's house, and it came up on the TV about them talking about how they were searching the river for guns, and they showed his face and they showed Chris's face and stuff. And I remember her like grabbing me up and hugging me and being like, "Oh, it's okay, you're allowed to cry." But I hadn't cried. I wasn't. I wasn't sad, and I didn't understand why everybody else was mad that Chris had done this, because this was stuff that, like, we were very much a you go to church family. They like would constantly take us to church, whether it wasn't an option. And like if you needed something fixed, you prayed to God. That's what they would tell us. So like it didn't make sense to me. And it never made sense. Yeah. So I remember a lot of that. And it was really weird because she was holding me and she was crying. And I remember feeling weird because one of her tears ended up in my ear. And then I got in trouble for like telling her, like pushing her away and telling her to let me go and stuff. She was very much like vent on the fact of if you needed corrected, you needed physical correction. So like would hit you with rulers and yardsticks. And then if you like I got to the point where like I learned like, oh well, you can fight back. Like she was a lot less scary than Vince and a lot could not handle me. She was a little old lady. She was my grandmother. So she'd start calling my uncle over to handle me because she couldn't. Um, so that yeah, she had gotten really mad. And I remember thinking like there was one point where um she still wanted us to go to church, and that's when I stopped because I was like, it doesn't make sense how this is Chris's fault. If anything, it's my fault because that's what I prayed for, and this is what happened because I prayed for us to be taken away from Vince and for this to stop. Um, so, yeah. And I don't remember him ever. I don't ever remember being told he had 1,800 years until well after um, my mom got visitation rights back. I remember my grandmother talking about having him put to death, and she would constantly tell my sister Anna, "Well, I could have had him on the death sentence, and I didn't do that. Be thankful." Um, and she would argue with my sister Anna a lot about Chris and about how Anna must have known what was going to happen, um, and how like all of Chris's friends were involved, and it was this whole thing. Um, So, yeah, I did not. They did not have a good. My sister and her did not have a good relationship. Obviously, um, after that.
So do you remember the first time you were able to visit Chris in prison, if you have visited him in prison yet?
Yes. Oh, so my mom had just gotten custody of us, and we went up to the prison. And I remember I was so stressed out. I was so excited to get to see him. I talked to him on phones. I wrote him letters, but I was gonna actually get to see him. And I wore a camo shirt, which is very much against Virginia DOC policy. So then I started crying and breaking out because they weren't gonna let me in. And my dad, well, my stepdad, but I call him my dad, Claude. He's like, we knew this was gonna happen. We brought more clothes, and they're running me outside to change me and stuff. So we finally get back in there, and we're buying Chris like you. This is before they took out vending machines because Virginia DOC removed all vending machines and everything from visitation now. We're buying him a bunch of coffee, and they have like these heat up hamburgers and meals and sodas and stuff that he can't get back for commissary and stuff. So we're buying all of it because they were not as strict at the time. I think the prison we went to was Keene Mountain, which is the one that he just left. He was at Keene Mountain for a long time, a long time. Um, and he got a Milky Way because he wanted a bunch of chocolate. He was super hyped up. We had each brought $20 worth of quarters with us, which is not the policy. Policy is one bag of $20 now, but back then they were not as strict about it. They were getting our money, so why did they care? And he ate and drank so much coffee and candy and stuff that like to the point where like he had just a stash in front of him and was like talking with us and pointing like Snickers and Milky Ways at us. And when we left, he couldn't take all the stuff with him, so we had to take with us. And I remember like it was so much fun. Like we laughed and cried the whole time. Like I got to hug him. Um, sorry. And we left, and I got mad at Casey because she was like, "Oh yeah, I'm hungry." I'm gonna eat this Milky Way. And I was like, you can't. It's Chris's. And I was like, in my like, I was like 12, 11. I was like, oh yeah, like, um, that's when it hit that like, there's a chance, there's a real possibility he'll never come home because like, that's when mom really had to like explain that to me because I was like, oh no, we can just save it for him for when he comes home. Because I'd had other brothers. I have 5 brothers. So I had other brothers um in prison who got to come home. And so that's when it like was really explained to me, like, oh yeah, this is how you will always get to see him. Like you will probably never get to see him home. Um, of course we'll do everything we can to bring him home. Um, but yeah, and so I went to visit him probably not as much as I would want to ever. Um, but I've gotten to visit him throughout the years and then schedule, video visits with him now, thankfully. They have video visits and yeah, and then I go up every chance I get.
That's good. That
Sorry.
no, no, it's okay. I totally understand. So I know you spoke a lot about it, but what are your overall thoughts on the case and what happened to not only Vince but Chris, like his sentence and everything? Like, what are your overall thoughts? Like, do you think he should have been like charged with maybe like manslaughter or charges should have been dropped? Like, what do you think should have happened? Like, if it was up to you and your family, what do you think you guys would have chose, when it came to Chris's fate?
So I have a lot of feelings about the case. One of which was I know that um, they do this to protect young kids, but I know like there was a bar that was set that they were not allowed to. If this did go to trial, they were not allowed to talk to the us girls because we were so young. And I think that was a crucial point in the case. I think that public defenders are overworked. They have a trillion cases, and that's what Chris had, a public defender that was overworked, that wanted a case closed the fastest and easiest way he could think to close it, and who ultimately didn't do his job correctly because of that. I think there was a lot of evidence left out, like his psych evaluation. I feel like that plays a key role into it. To have an outside party come in and say, this man, talking about Christopher, was sexually abused by Vincent. This was a trauma response. This was part of his raising. My mom, I've read the psych evaluation, and it specifically mentions how my mom was so venomous against Vince that kind of altered the way Chris saw the situation. He didn't see it as doing anything wrong anymore because that's all he'd heard was how terrible Vince was and how he deserved, not to be around anymore because of what he had done to the boys and what he was doing to the girls. And how there was no like Chris was not in his right mind. That is such a key factor. Chris needed mental health help and help to get his future right. He didn't need to go to prison for the rest of his life. And the fact that, in Virginia, even now, a life sentence isn't 600 years anymore. But you still have Chris and hundreds of other offenders who are having this old time law held against them that says it had to have been 600 years or could have been anything 600 and up. I think if it would have been me, if I could have chosen my way, I've worked a lot in mental health. And I would have done or looked for a not guilty for reason of insanity, just like his, psychologist suggested. He wasn't in his right mind. He needed mental health help. He definitely needed help out of a terrible situation. And he did the only thing he could think of to stop it. Social services were involved a lot. I didn't know it at the time, really. I just remember these ladies constantly coming over and talking to us. Um, the state knew what was going on. There was another child involved. And his family had, went through social services about what Vince had done to him. So like social services should have stepped in. It should have never been left up to Chris to kind of stop what was going on. And then him handling it the way he did, You took a person who was abused himself and you threw him away as trying to be like a hard on crime punishment thing because it was a small town. And he did this atrocity without considering the fact that um, he saved three little girls. He might have ended one man, but he saved three little girls. So, I definitely would have rather seen him do not guilty for reason of insanity or have a lesser sentence that saw him coming home, for sure.
Yeah, I think it's pretty ridiculous that he got 1800 years when in similar situations, I mean, people have killed their abusers and either got off or like Centoya Brown in Tennessee, like she killed her rapist and got life, I believe. But now she's out of prison, because I think Kim Kardashian and a few others were rallying behind her. But I think it's time to you know, not be so hard on people that, you know, feel like they either have to kill themselves or kill their abusers to get out of the situation. And obviously it's not their fault. So, killing their abuser, it's probably not the best thing to do, but if they feel like they can't escape from that, then somebody's dropped the ball, when they're trying to reach for help, like it's just like a lot of high profile prisoners tell me like mental health, issues. Like I was having so many mental health issues on the streets, nobody would talk to me. Then I go out and kill five, six, seven people. And now I have the best mental health treatment, in the United States in prison, but I'm never gonna get out, type of thing.
Yeah, and that's a huge thing. Is like, especially I can't speak whether this is better now or not. But I can say like I see it all the time. Like I've worked as a resident support person for people who are coming out of mental health hospitals, and transitioning back into the world. And I've seen it even with them. Like they were people who were on the street and had no access to any type of help until they got committed to a hospital because they did something, like they wouldn't have normally done if they had mental health help. And I feel like that's a really big thing. If the things we put in place, like social services, local CSBs, um, you know, mental health help, like getting medical care when you need it, stuff like that. If it's utilized, if it is done properly, it can be very helpful for people and save people from having to, be committed for multiple years of their life or in prison for multiple years of their life just to get the help they need. Everybody waits till something I feel like is an extreme before they step in. And I feel like that's especially true in small towns because they feel like they can handle it, or it's, that's just crazy Joe. Oh, that's just how Vince is. That's just, people are quick to make excuses for how people are instead of just being like, you know what? That's not right. You need help. I remember a huge thing, even when we did, the Dr. Phil show. I had people who were my age reaching out to me on Facebook from Craigsville being like, well, my dad worked with Vince and he said that that's a lie because Vince is a veteran, so he would never do that. Well, that doesn't negate what Vince did. It doesn't at all. He can be a veteran and still be a monster who abused his children. Um, and it's not something Casey or Anna or me and even Chris talk about. That's something we leave very much alone, because we handle our trauma differently, and that's one of the first times I've ever heard Chris's side of things was on the Dr. Phil show, and I never knew how bad it was for him. And I will never probably ever talk to my sisters about it. So if we're not even talking to each other about it, what makes you think that, adults in the situation were, talking about it that way, or being honest with people about what was going on?
Right, right. Yeah, I mean, like you said, I mean, somebody could had like a good past and still be a bad person. Like look at BTK, Dennis Rader. He was binding, torturing, and killing families, but he was also a family man at the same time. I mean, they live double lives. Like sociopaths and psychopaths are are like better actors than Hollywood actors, like they can go out and rape and kill, then come home and like love their wife and kids like, they like nothing happened, it's It's crazy.
It is. And when you're enabled to do it, like Vincent's mom, my grandmother, she knew something was going on. Like I remember trying to talk to her multiple times about it after Vince was dead. And I remember like us finding, pictures. And I remember one time she sold everything in the Craigsville house, everything that she could. She kept a few of his shirts and had, teddy bears made out of them. It was like, oh, keep them in this bag so they'll still smell like him. And they were his work shirts and stuff. And like outside of that, though, she got rid of everything. And this, including Vincent's camcorders. Vince loved to record everything. And the first part of the like the recording seemed so normal. Like she gave it to me. She's like, here, it's a great recording of you and your dad. And it's me playing like Weather Woman with Casey outside, showing off the box turtle we captured and had in a tote outside and stuff like that. But I knew it was coming next. It was a sex video of him and Elizabeth that he had shown me multiple times. And I remember like taking it to her and being like, no, look, I told you this stuff happened. I can tell you everything that happens on this video after this. And it's like him zooming in on Elizabeth's vagina and all this other stuff that no kid should ever be able to tell you about. Um, and I remember her taking it and like she broke a yardstick hitting me so hard with it. It was like, we're never going to talk about this again. Like, I never saw that video again. We found like naked pictures of us and like she burned them. She would have us write letters to Vince every couple of months, every month, and we'd have to burn them so that he could get them and read them in heaven. It was really, really strange. And she burnt the pictures. And so in my head, that was always like, well, if you think these letters are going to heaven and you're burning those pictures, and then why would you want him to have naked pictures of us? Why would you ever be okay with that? So in my head, that always made her complacent in the matter, for sure, or at least accepting of it because she really did like everything she could to like keep us, or at least keep me from talking about it and like denying it ever happened and being like, that's just crazy. That's all in your head, And people like that enable people like Vince to continue doing stuff behind everybody's back and continue that perpetual, oh no, he's a good guy, routine instead of just listening to the people who are speaking up about it.
Right, right. Yeah, I agree 100%. Um, so has this case brought you and Chris closer throughout time, or has it done the complete opposite?
Um, I think that's a double edged sword. So we don't talk about the case much. Me and Chris are very close. I have lost almost all my brothers. He is one of my only living remaining brothers. Um, I think it does bring us close in the fact that, it's made me very much uh, active in the prison reform world. And that's stuff that we can talk about and not get overly emotional with, or I won't get overly emotional. Um, I think on that point, it brings us together. And I know, like, doing interviews, doing the TikToks, doing, everything that I've done over the years. So, like, sometimes it's put a strain on us, me being like, hang on, I got to take a step back because now this is getting too much for me. And he's always like, okay, don't do it because he doesn't want that for me. But at the same time, like, I want him home. And who better to speak on it if not one of the victims you saved? If my other sisters can't do it for their reasons, then it's kind of like I have to. So like it's kind of like that gets iffy sometimes, but it's definitely made us closer. He's my everything. I tell him everything, all the crazy work stories and stuff. And it's had very much the opposite effect on me and my sisters. Me and my sisters do not speak if we can avoid it. And we live through this stuff together. We do not speak about it. We do not speak to each other very much. Um, it's very much like if you need me, you can reach out. But if we're together for too long, we're fighting and arguing, and like um, we all handled our traumas differently. And I think we all kind of like get mad at the other for how they handled their trauma. So
So is there anything that you'd like the public to know about yourself, your brother, or this case for that matter?
um, I'd like them to understand that, a lot of people feel like they can't do anything to help with this case. And what people can do is, voting for the right governor. The only person who can help Chris come home is the governor himself. A lot of people, we always get, reach out to President Trump. This is a state case. So even if Trump wanted to legally, he's not allowed to have anything to do with this case. He can throw his support behind it. So like being educated in what you're voting for, understand that, um, there are a lot of people like Chris in the prison system, and the best way to help all of them is prison reform and putting people in power who want them to come home. Virginia is very much a lock them up and throw away the key state. There's a lot of things that happen to Chris and prisoners like Chris that are terrible in Virginia. And the best way to stay up to date on his case is by following his Facebook. And the best way to help is reaching out to the governor. He does have a team of lawyers, and he's currently working with another set of lawyers on a different matter to try to attack this in a public way in the courts. Um, and that hopefully works as well. But at the end of the day, the best way to bring him home is the governor releasing him. And he's the only one who can.
So before we conclude this interview, is there anything that you'd like to talk about that we haven't covered yet?
Um, no, I think we covered everything. I can't think of anything off the top of my head.
Okay. Well, I appreciate you doing this with me today. I know it's probably not easy to talk about it, but I'm sure the more you do, the better it gets. And I'm glad that Chris has, you in his corner, and I'm glad that over 150,000 people know that this sentence was wrong, and they're, signing the petition and trying to, get it to the governor in front of the governor's eyes. I think eventually he's going to have to do something, or whoever, takes his place if he doesn't win re-election, because like I said, there's been so many victims that have killed their abusers that have either got life in prison and have been released, or have been acquitted of the charges, and I feel like, I mean, honestly, I feel like if my sister was being abused by somebody in that situation, I can't blame Chris, and I think anybody would do the same thing. If as long as they had a heart and they, were I mean, sickened and disgusted by the act. I mean, I can't think of anybody that wouldn't do the same if they had a, weapon on them.
No, of course. Like I think that's the basis consensus. And thank you so much for doing this, because people like you who reach out, who get into Chris's case, who want to learn more about it, um, that's why we have the followers we have. That's why we have so much support. So thank you very much for doing this and for taking the time to listen to both of us.
Yeah, most definitely. And I'm going to keep in touch with Chris. I hope that, he'll stay in touch with me, and we can, do follow-ups and so on and so forth. And hopefully when he's released, we can do more after that, and, maybe get him like speaking publicly, or something, or helping other survivors of DV, or, sexual abuse.
Yeah, definitely. I know that's one thing me and him have talked a lot about, is what he wants to do when he comes home, and like all the stuff he wants to do, especially for, you know, people who've been hurt, and then the people who are still in prison that are just like him. So,
That was my interview with Victoria McDorman. If you like the show, feel free to leave a review. Head on over to unforbiddentruth.org to pick up some merch to support the show, like a coffee mug, tank top, t shirt, and more. Thank you for listening. See you on the next one.